Hello and welcome to the Responsive Family Sleep Podcast. I'm your host, Kim Hawley, holistic sleep coach, lactation consultant, peaceful parenting educator, and mom. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by all the conflicting sleep info, frustrated with sleep information that just plain felt wrong, or searched desperately for a truly gentle and responsive sleep approach, then you are in the right place. In each episode, we'll be answering your most pressing baby and toddler sleep questions, busting those sleep myths, and helping you understand truly developmental, biologically normal baby and toddler sleep, plus encouraging you to trust your intuition along the way. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. We are talking all about those wild and crazy toddlers who you're sure are ready for bed, but then get the wild, silly, crazy Zoomies and are just complete and utter chaos right at bedtime. So before we get into that, I just want to pause and share a few logistical housekeeping kind of summer details about the podcast with you all. So this is the last new episode that's going to be out until September. And don't worry, your podcast won't disappear from your podcast feed or whatever I'm supposed to technically call it. Sorry. I am going to be re-releasing some podcast episodes from the archives, which people call it different things, rerun episodes, re-releases, what have you. I got from the archives from one of my favorite history podcasts. So just a little shout out to This Day, a podcast my husband and I love to listen to together, and they do from the archives episodes. So I hope y'all don't mind me borrowing that. I don't know if that's where it originated, but I'm going to be selecting episodes over the next 6 weeks or so that I think are really good topics to revisit, right? As you are in different points of your parenting journey. Things have different meanings, right? You take different things away when you're in a different phase. And so I'm going to be primarily reaching back probably to the first year of the podcast for those who will have not heard this in a while, or maybe didn't go back and listen, found the podcast later. But these are topics I think it's really important to have reminders of, and some will be guest episodes and some will be solo episodes. So I hope you'll enjoy those over the rest of July and August. And I'm doing this for a couple reasons, right? One is to just give me a content break to let the creative juices flow and be back fresh in the fall. It's been a really stressful year over here, so it's kind of been one thing after another, and a little extra breathing room and a little recharge is definitely what I need. But it also lets me lower my workload over the summer while my kids are out of school, and that's just really lovely. Also, this first part of the summer, we've been knee deep in kitchen renovations, rebuild, whatever. Our dishwasher leaked in the end of April and flooded our kitchen, and it's been a whole saga that has definitely made the first part of the summer a bit more stressful. So, for those of you who don't know how podcasts work, I do tend to make my episodes ahead. So, I'm not recording this in July, but I can tell you that it's been a whole thing. So all that to be said is you'll be having some from the archives episodes for us this summer. And please, this is a lovely time to reach out to me and tell me what you would like to hear this fall. Whether it's a guest for me to track down or a topic you want to see me talk about. I love hearing that input from you. So you can DM me on Instagram, or you can head to my website and send me an email. And I'd love to hear from you. So let's jump in. Toddlers, they can get truly wild at the end of the day. Both my kiddos were like this 100%. So this isn't a matter of being perfect and being able to always get out ahead of it. I just want to throw that out there. Both my kiddos, still sometimes get wild at the end of the day when we haven't structured our day correctly or evening correctly. So it happens, right? We're all human. Things happen. But what is going on here? Why might they be just total chaos right when you know they should be winding down for sleep, and, resisting all your best efforts to wind them down and calm them down for sleep. So there are some common reasons, right? And so we're going to work through those. So the first is that they are overstimulated or dysregulated, which are related but not necessarily always the same thing, right? And so we can see this when they had a bad nap, they've been awake too long, it's gotten too late, you had really overstimulating activities or too much going on throughout the day. And just by the time they hit bedtime, they're done. But instead of that coming out as tired or grumpy, it's coming out as wired, right? Wired and hyper, kind of manic, over the top, all over the place. They cannot regulate themselves. And so again, that can be overtired, causing dysregulation. It can be overstimulated, causing dysregulation. And frankly, it also can be understimulated because everything in sleep seems to be one thing or the opposite, right? Meaning that they had a really unstimulating day, and then all of a sudden it catches up with them and they're wild at bedtime. And so we have different causes here, right? But the end result is that they are wired, they are wild, and they are dysregulated. And so this is tricky, right? Because you can't just get a kiddo to calm down when they're like that. We need to actually help them calm down. And I'm going to kind of get back to that in just a moment, right? I said one of the reasons it could be wired or dysregulated or crazy, wild, chaos little makers, is because they had too much stimulation or not enough stimulation. And so sometimes if we've had a really cooped up second half of the day, right, they have so much energy they need to get out because they didn't get it out earlier in the day, that we see all this energy bursting out later in the day. Just going to keep going through some of the reasons they might be wild, and then we'll talk about like, oh my gosh, what can we do, right? Sometimes kiddos get wild at bedtime because we're actually asking them to go to bed too early. And it's frustrating, and they're not ready to wind down. Like their body has not gotten enough movement. They're really not tired. They're not ready for sleep. And this can happen if they had a really long, late nap, right? And you're still sticking with their regular bedtime. Or when we're traveling and we have a mismatch of like time zone and our body's clock. It can happen when we're just asking our child to go to bed too early for them, for whatever reason. And that's frustrating, right? It's kind of hard when you lay in bed and can't fall asleep. Well, kiddos have so much energy. It's hard for them too. So if they're like, oh no, I recognize this bedtime routine is starting, I'm going to start resisting because I'm not tired or I don't want to go to sleep. Maybe it's FOMO, right? And so on that same note, toddlers want to connect with you, and developmentally, their job is to sort of test boundaries a bit and figure out where those are and what does that look like and cause and effect. And so if you've been kind of doing your own thing throughout the evening, and then it's time to go up to bed and maybe not as actively connecting with your kiddo as you could, and suddenly they're like, woohoo, wild time. And then all of a sudden you're either playfully or maybe frustratedly trying to calm them down and corral them up to sleep. All of a sudden they have your attention, right? And they're kind of figuring out what happens if I do this when mommy or daddy or my parent does this, right? So you have a little bit of boundary testing and a need to connect, right? A need to connect, which is fundamentally what our kiddos need, particularly ahead of sleep. So we have all sorts of reasons: not enough movement, understimulation, overstimulation, too early of a bedtime, being out late, right? Like being kind of in an overstimulating environment, not enough connection, the need to push boundaries. All these things can lead to our wild children at bedtime. Now, in my kiddos, I have found that also certain types of play tend to amp them up later in the day, or maybe just amps them up anyway, but we cope with it better earlier in the day. So when they were little, and they're 5 years apart, so little, together. So I guess school age for my big kid, toddler for my little one. When they started running up and down our house. So we live in a row home in DC. You walk in the front door and there's a straight hallway down through our kitchen, past the living room, through our kitchen to the back door. So it's like a straight path. If they started running up and down that like straight front to back of the house, just back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, oh my God, it amped them up so much. It's still kind of one of those wild signs for me that they are just kind of being wild. It was so hard to calm them down. And yet other types of active play were really helpful. So I think there's a sensory sort of knowing what activities make sense in the evening piece here, because it took me and my husband forever to figure out that like we need to kind of get them out of that before they lock into this zoom, 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 back and forth up and down the house. So I've seen this with my clients as well, with their families, like some types of play just amp the kiddo up, and they're so amped up, versus like something that gets their energy out, but they're able to come back down. They're able to re-regulate afterwards. Very individual, something to be mindful of. So your kiddo's got the crazies, the zoomies, they're running around all over the place. What do you do, right? The first thing I would do is just give a quick glance at your timings. Have they been awake so long they're dysregulated? Are they not ready for bed yet? Like, what's happening on the sleep timing front? And the next thing that I would do is think about their activity throughout the day, right? Did they get enough movement? Kids need to move, right? They are not meant to be sedentary. So did you get outside? Did they get fresh air? Did they get a lot of climbing and pushing and pulling and running? Did they get their movement? And did they get enough connection with you, right? Sometimes kids will act wild in order to get our attention, because when they're being calm, our attention is more divided. Like it happens. It's it can be a pattern. So think about your timings, your activity, your connection, right? Are we where we need to be? And then think about your evening flow. Evening can be a really rushed time, especially during the week if you are trying to get everything sorted, childcare, work, bedtime, dinner, dishes, getting ready for the next day, all the things. And so if we as the parent are rushing around, feeling kind of like, right? Our kiddos can rush around being like, and then get really amped up. So really thinking about your day, your evening, like how are all these pieces coming together? And then, okay, maybe we have some timing things to adjust, or maybe we need to chill out ourselves, right? Maybe we need to simplify, de-stress our evenings. All those things can be pieces. But I also want you to remember that we don't necessarily need hours and hours of calm ahead of sleep. So a lot of times what we need to do is channel that energy into play, after dinner, right? Still a little bit away from bedtime. And get their energy out in ways that are interactive and connection focused. But maybe not in the running up and down the house, like amping them up, right? So just bring in some curiosity to do your kiddos have a type of play where that is a factor? Like I said, it might not be that for your kiddos running laps, but for mine, definitely was. So is there like a type of play that you want to avoid? I had a client who they found that like toys with lights and sound really amped their kiddo up. And so they were like, actually, after about 4:00, we just want those toys to go away. So they're earlier in the day toys, and it made a difference for their kiddo. Could be like you do FaceTime with family early in the day, because once the phone comes out, kiddo is all like, ooh, right? That way you also keep screens further away from bedtime. So really just thinking about what things tend to really amp your kiddo up and what things don't, or are more grounding. So channel that energy, push, pull, carry, climb. Those tend to be really grounding big body movements. And then remember, we can't make somebody calm down. So if we're well set up for the evening, kind of invite the energy down based on your own behavior. Like if you've been really silly with them, calm yourself down. Go do something that is a bit calmer and see if that, like, ooh, what is mom doing over there? Ooh, mom's coloring. Maybe I want to color, right? Or mom's calmly stacking the blocks. Maybe I want to go see what she's doing. You can shift music, right? Maybe you were doing a family dance party. And another favorite when my kids were younger. And maybe we go from high energy pop music to like slower music. And we kind of bring the energy level down that way. We can dim the lights. We can offer a snack as a way to kind of transition out of the high energy play. So we can kind of invite that energy level down, knowing that they're going to pick up on our energy as well. So when we're well set up for the evening, we go from high energy, we do a bit of a calming transition, and then we do our bedtime routine. If kiddos are resisting, because toddlers do, right? That's when we want to give some choices. We want to bring some playfulness into those transitions, because that's a time where we're asking a kiddo to follow our agenda, and they kind of want to stick with what they're interested in. So those transitions can be really tricky. But let's say everything went off the rails and we're back in that wired state, right? Sleep is not going to happen if they are wired and they are dysregulated, even if that is joyful, gleeful, sillies, right? So sometimes we kind of need to meet them where they're at. Again, let them burn some of that energy off, but then set the environment up to kind of invite that energy down. So maybe we'll want to meet them and get a little bit of silly play with them, connect with them, and then slow our own energy down. Put on quieter music, dim the lights. Because we fundamentally need to let that wave of chaos energy pass before they're going to calm down for sleep. And they're not necessarily going to go from all the way high energy, like woo, down to calm. Some kiddos do. So it's not impossible, but a lot of times we need to help bring that energy down and just sort of extend the invitation, but first connect, right? First join them, bring it down. So if we find, on a one-off that our kid is wild at bedtime, I don't think it's really worth getting too fussed about. Help them calm down, sure, but we all have off days, right? Especially if it's like around travel or something that's going to amp them up, or again, they're in a car all day. Of course, they're going to go wild at bedtime. Like connecting the dots there can be helpful. So you kind of anticipate these things might happen. But if it's happening regularly, right, that's when we really need to take a little bit of a closer look at the whole 24 hours and make sure they're getting what they need as far as sleep timings and sleep pressure and movement and connection, and all of those lovely pieces are coming together because we don't want to make that time leading up to bedtime chronically stressful. Because then as parents, you dread it. As kiddos, we get in these bad sort of patterns. And, that's a sign that it's time to take a deeper look. And of course, if you want help with that deeper look, I'm here. Reach out to me. I love sort of sorting through all the different pieces and figuring out how do we get this, into a more sustainable and easier and connected space. So if you have any fun stories about your toddlers or preschoolers being kind of wild at bedtime, I think they can be fun stories to swap. I'd love to hear them if you want to reach out and share. Or again, if you have any ideas, things you'd like to see as far as podcasts in the fall, please do send them to me. If you need support over the summer, I am here. Reach out and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your summer. We'll be back with new episodes in September. Thank you for joining me today. I hope this episode left you feeling more informed, confident, and encouraged on your sleep journey. And just a reminder before you go that nothing in this episode is individualized to your specific sleep situation, nor is it to be taken as medical advice. Take what resonates, ignore what doesn't, and check with your healthcare provider about any medical concerns. Take a moment to subscribe to this podcast so that you'll never miss an episode. And take a moment to rate, review, or share an episode you love on social media. All of that helps parents just like you find me, this podcast, and this gentle and responsive sleep information. I'll see you next time.